Good afternoon, everybody, and you're very warmly welcome to this first in a series of 3 webinars around impact that are being run by Elsevier. The topic of today's subject is embracing broader research impacts, looking beyond metrics, and we want to look today at societal dimensions. I'm delighted you could all join us for what I can promise will be an illuminating and thought-provoking session, given our excellent lineup of speakers. Firstly, let me introduce myself. I'm Lesley Thompson, and in Elsevier, I'm responsible for thinking about how we can better serve research funders with products and services globally. Prior to joining Elsevier, I spent 26 years in the UK's largest public research funder, the EPSRC, now part of UKRI. I've spent most of my professional career chasing that elusive impact, building the evidence case for how past investments in research have delivered real life impact, as making the case for continued investment in UK research, an endeavour that all scientists, all research leaders and all funders around the world are continually working on. So this webinar is really close to my heart. I should add that in Elsevier, I also am part of a team that are looking at how we expand our list of indicators and evaluation framework to extend beyond bibliometrics. And my specific role is leading that work across the UK. Towards the end of last year, working with Ipsos Mori, a survey of academic leaders, funders and library leaders, a view from the top, the link is in the chat, showed that in a global survey, 80% of global leaders said that demonstrating societal impact was a high priority for them, but only 40% felt that they were prepared to do this. So let's involve the audience now. Let's compare how you today feel about delivering impact and societal impact compared to your institutions. So you will see on the screen now a poll, and the question we're asking you today is your institution well prepared to demonstrate its societal impact? And the answer is a simple yes or no. That poll will be on the system now, and we'll come back to the results of the poll at the end of this webinar. So let's see what thoughts, here we are. Let's see what thoughts our speakers have today. I'm delighted to say we have a fantastic set of speakers. We're going to start with Professor Keith Osman, who's Director of Research Excellence at Birmingham City University. So Keith, can I invite you to give your thoughts on societal impact? It's over to you. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Lesley, and good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to share with you some thoughts that I have about impact, and this really comes from 2 perspectives. One, having been a researcher, but latterly having gone over to the dark side and being a research administrator, particularly with responsibility for the UK Research Excellence Framework. Just perhaps a little bit of context. I mean, Birmingham City University is a large teaching intensive but research engaged institution. We've got actually roots that go back quite a long way, back to 1843, but we have a very strong civic purpose about obviously changing the lives of our students and supporting innovation and real world impacts, particularly through collaborative research. I have an engineering background as a researcher, and I've actually in the past been a recipient of funding from the EPSRC, so thank you, Lesley, for that. But actually now I have a responsibility to help the university evidence the impact of the research that it carries out across all of its subject areas rather than just my own. So perhaps if we start, and we perhaps don't need to go through this at length, but obviously there's a political dimension to impact which we shouldn't lose sight of. Clearly, funders of research are required increasingly to evidence the value for money to the economy, to society, from the investment of public funding in research. And of course, there are many, many competing returns, competing claims on their funding, so quicker returns on this investment, shorter pathways to impact are required. Also, of course, just as part of their general commitment to the communities in which are embedded, Universities are required to evidence the positive contributions of all types that they make to society and to the economy, both within their region, nationally, and increasingly internationally. We're also seeing now that various forms of national research assessment exercises are including impact, and in the UK, the last two REFs, REF 2014 and REF 21, included impact. It was not in the previous exercises. And of course, we've seen also now that the Times Higher, in addition to the World University Rankings, has introduced the Global Impact Ranking tables to help institutions particularly evidence how they contribute to various UN SDGs. So the whole the political dimension for impact is changing quite rapidly now. So let's try and deal with this word impact, because obviously I think for many of us we tended, this can be confused with metrics relating to publishing. In our particular context of this conversation, where we're talking about societal impact, in essence, impact is simply the very wide range of societal benefits that accrue when research is put to work. So it's not about the publishing of it, it's not the act of dissemination, it's the act of application, and then end users benefiting from the application of that. Now, one of the challenges of impact, as we'll all be aware, is it's often unplanned. It's often not easy to find, and it can be increasingly difficult to evidence or to corroborate, particularly if you haven't been sort of on top of this from the beginning. But it is essential that we're able to demonstrate the wider end user value of research expenditure, both from research grants, but also from the time universities invest in enabling staff to do research. And I think this little quote from Lewis Carroll is actually quite an interesting one, which I won't bother reading, but it's a useful one actually to hold on to for this purpose. Now, I know this sounds UK-centric, but I think it's worth just looking at how the research excellence framework in the UK dealt with impact, because it was defined specifically as the impact of excellent research. And it was really, as we can see here, this beneficial effect, but very widely, whether it's on the economy, society, culture, public policy, etc., beyond academia. And this was the important thing: what happens to research when it's put to work outside of the higher education sector. And REF 2021 assessed this in terms of from case studies, which narrated the details of the impact, the underpinning research. Oh, excuse me, my slides appear to have gone slightly strange now. So I appear to have somebody else's slides present on the screen. Is somebody able to help me undo that? Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So REF 2021 assessed impact in terms of significance and reach. Significance being how significant was the actual impact, and reach wasn't simply about geographical reach, it was about the number of organisations, the beneficiaries who benefited from this. Just to put this into context, from the REF submission, to which around 150 institutions submitted, there were nearly 7,000 case studies. And interestingly, and it's worth looking at these if you post-event, nearly 6,500 of these are actually available in a public database published post-REF. And this includes both the full text of the impact case studies, but also a number of the documents linked to those. Now, one important thing to recognize, and this links back to our own understanding of impact, is it can take quite a long time to get from disseminating new research findings to somebody picking it up, applying it, and benefits flowing to end users. So for REF 2021, 20 years was allowed between the actual research being published and the impact actually flowing to end users. So this quite long period, accepting that particularly in STEM disciplines, it can take a long time to go from lab to end user. The impact cases didn't include publication impact, field rate associated indices, funding, or anything of that sort, although there were a few measures linked to the underpinning research. But the key thing was that the case studies had to demonstrate 4 separate things. So the underpinning research was narrated. This is the body of research from which the claim impact resulted. And this included details of up to 6 publications, grant funding that may have underpinned some of the research, and also the researchers involved and their ORCIDs. That was only a very small part of it, though, because the major part of the case study was around the description of the impacts that were actually claimed, what these were, who benefited, how many, where they were, etc. All very well to create a very nice description, but that then had to be supported by evidence of the claim impact. So it wasn't good enough to just say what it was. You had to point to sources that could actually evidence that impact. Now, some of that could have come from beneficiaries themselves. Some of it could be evidence that was actually still in the public domain. And then the final part was corroboration. If you were claiming benefits accrued by end users, there needed to be corroboration by end users that those benefits were actually achieved, not that you'd simply described them and provided evidence. So the case studies were felt to be quite an interesting way of doing things. And the case studies for REF 2021 were fairly unchanged from the previous REF when they were first introduced in 2014 at the behest of UKRI. So in the context of REF, there were 8 categories of impact, or 8 types of impact shown here. And these all fall within this umbrella category that we referred to today as societal impact. So whether this was economic impact or environmental impact, political, legal, cultural, etc., they were all forms of impact. And obviously each of these comes with very different challenges in terms of being able to evidence it, being able to describe what the impacts were, and in trying to find individuals who can corroborate those impacts. And this is particularly true with things that might be related, for example, to policy or legal framework, because some of these things are quite transient and linked to changes in government. Other things are quite sensitive. It's quite sensitive to try to narrate, for example, the economic benefit of a new product or service for a commercial organization. They may not necessarily want to reveal details of what was linked to that particular thing which the research helped generate. It's worth then just looking at the way these actually broke down. In the case of the last REF, 85% of those impact case studies submitted were societal, culture, or environmental. There's something gone slightly wrong with this slide. I think perhaps I may have sent the wrong version of it. There was only around 10% of the impact case studies submitted that linked to legal, political, and similar types of impacts. So the majority of this was about societal impact in the way we're describing them today. But all of these impact types fall within the societal umbrella that we're discussing here. So, as we said earlier, impact can be quite difficult to actually find. It can be difficult to generate. It can be difficult to evidence. So clearly, it's much easier if impact is planned and managed as part of the research process. But don't stop when the research is finished, because as we've seen, the impact tends to accumulate after the research is completed and after the research has been handed over to others. And that's often the point at which the researchers have disengaged from the research and moved on to the next piece of research, leaving others to downstream the research out to users. Every research project should logically have an impact pathway plan, not actually saying what the impacts are going to be, because you won't know at that point, but how any potential impact might be actually pipelined to research users. Now, outputs from curiosity-led research can sometimes be quite high impact, but they are very unplanned and hence they're difficult to evidence. Demand-led research, where you're building in research users, end users, commercial organizations, etc., can be much, much easier to deal with. And obviously partnering academics with colleagues in their institutions who are involved in some of the public engagement activities, innovation knowledge transfer, or direct enterprise activities can help, again, provide these managed pathways to the marketplace. The models of impact, and these are not the only ones, but we often think about impact as being a sort of passing the baton of new knowledge type model, where it's moving from a researcher's lab bench perhaps to a proof of concept, perhaps to a commercial demonstration, then out perhaps to licensing or exploitation to the marketplace. And that can be true, and that is where we get this traditional long pathways to impact with STEM disciplines. But also increasingly, and this is very true of research funded by the UKRI, which is industry-led or funded by the European Commission through things like FP8, Horizon, etc., is the co-creation model where in the project per se, you have research performers, you have end users, you have organizations who will exploit and take to market. And in that case, everybody is working during the lifetime of the project and the work continues after the project. We don't quite so much have the problem of throwing the baton into the audience and hoping somebody is going to pick it up. Finding impacts, as we said, is extremely difficult. Impact on policy, it can be relatively simple to track through bibliometric data. And all metrics can help provide some clues perhaps, but are unlikely really to evidence the actual impact. They might evidence there was a potential for impact because it's been picked up and applied by people. Hardest to track from our experience is the research that academics do using their academic time that isn't linked to external reporting obligations. I will skip over that slide, but I've left it in the notes for interest, but it's a way that SciVal was starting to try to do some of this work. So, as we've said, really, impact is a complicated thing. One little plea is our researchers are very busy. They have to do a myriad of things. So please be kind and supportive of them. Impact is something they have to do increasingly, but they have to do the research first before they can actually pipeline it to anybody. And so 3 takeaways really from me. Bibliometrics probably have little to do with real world impacts. And just because you can count something doesn't mean it counts. Slightly trite phrase, worth remembering. Impact is a long team game, not a short solo performance by a single researcher. And metrics for impact are emerging and will continue to emerge, but are largely unproven. And if they are linked indirectly to publications, that's always going to be problematic in the arts and humanities, where journal articles are not the primary output form. So thank you very much for attention, and I'll hand back to Lesley.
Talk through the many man and women hours that were spent doing the last ref and impact case studies, etc. So thank you. I think that set us up very nicely. I'd now like to turn to our second speaker, who is Susanna Nykyri, who is Chief Specialist Open Science Publishing Manager at Tampere University Press. Susanna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'm happy to be here. So thank you for your invitation, and also thank you, Keith, already. Yes, I'm Susanna Nykyri, and to my responsibilities belong the strategic planning of open science for Tampere University. Also participating and some responsibilities in national and international cooperation. I have broader than institutional responsibilities, especially regarding research data management, publishing, and metrics. And I also teach metrics as university library service at Åbo Academy University. And Tampere University is one of the most multidisciplinary universities in Finland and second largest in Finland. The university was created in 2019, so we are pretty young, and it was through a merger between the University of Tampere and Tampere University of Technology. And Tampere University brings together research and education in technology, health and society. And our community consists of about 22,500 students and around 4,200 staff members from more than 80 countries. So in comparison to what Keith just described. And now I'm showing you some national and local examples in promoting and capturing societal impact. As Keith already discussed, these are very tricky concepts, these impact and evaluation, and there is always this problem whether we want to look back or forward are we aiming at something which is evidence-based or potential or unexpected? What's the time frame and concreteness? And what about delayed recognition? In bibliometrics, there is this concept of sleeping beauties, which refers to articles which are very scarcely cited in the immediate years following their publication, but then go on to become highly cited. And I think we can see the same phenomenon also with societal impact and with when using qualitative methods also. And naturally, this defining what's the impact and also proper evaluation method should be done in very broad collaboration, and so also with the private, public and third sectors. And today we are very actively considering the role of activities, but here also the metadata quality and consistency is a very tricky, but something to be developed. On evaluation, the transparency and role of open science is very crucial in Tampere University when we are discussing societal impact. But what kind of methods we are using? So here, first of all, we have to make this distinction whether we are evaluating individual or organization or different kind of units. And we need, of course, these different types of evaluations, but not done in similar methods. One example how the Finnish universities are being evaluated is this National Open Science Monitoring Model, and it focuses on our guiding documents, open science documents, open science services, and also the open science rate of some of the concrete outputs. It also includes networking, partnerships, and collaboration. In Finland, all the Finnish universities are committed to the CORA agreement, and we also have a national chapter, and we are doing very close cooperation. Our university has already published the general action plan. It's truly very general at this point of development, and we are working on to be more precise and work it further, and in a broad cooperation with our whole community, but also with our open science steering. And universities, they have three main tasks in Finland. They are also defined in our law, national law. So they are research, education, and societal impact. And today, if you think this sustainable development, so it's very, very important and in a very center of many of our activities to consider that aspect. We have policies, well, not directly to societal impact or to the role of societal impact and what to do, but if I take up this open science policy, we have just updated. We had already in 2019 our first version, and just in this year we updated it. And the general message is that Tampere University is responsible and open societal influencer and partner. And there are many aspects which touch very directly also this societal aspects. So here are just some quotes, but I won't read it. I just leave them for you to take a closer look. But then what about individuals and their meriting system and also the role of curriculum vitae? In Finland, the Finnish National Board on Research Integrity, Universities Finland, Rectors Conference of Finnish Universities of Applied Sciences, and the Academy of Finland are in response for this national template, and it has been updated. The latest update has been in 2020. They are named the scientific and societal impact, And here is also the connection to open science and research. And then there is also this section, other merits. But I think we should go deeper and we should provide more ideas what it can be than what is just listed here. And one example is also languages in much broader sense than language skills. So coming from a small language area and being Finnish speaker, and we are already around 5 million in the world. So this Helsinki initiative for multilingualism in scholarly communication is very important. And it states that research is international, that's very clear. But there are some very important principles like this support. We should support dissemination of research results for the full benefit of the society, protect national infrastructures for publishing locally relevant research, and promote language diversity in research assessment, evaluation, and funding system. And this all has to do a lot to do with societal impact. So is paying attention to societal impact awarding, well, we have been strengthening that in our university, and we have launched this Societal Impact Award in 2019, so already in the first year of this new university. And with that award, we want to highlight the significance of societal interaction and impact in the university's community and award its members for success. So the award brings exemplary and successful societal interaction practices into public debate also outside the community. And it's the Societal Interaction Council of our university which then decides the recipients of the awards, but based on proposals received from the members of the whole higher education community. So it's that kind of very qualitative process, I would say. And here are some examples, or the examples. So you can see that they represent very different type of cases. There is this university, which is University for Children and Young People, for significant and continued work in the field of science education. And then there is this Professor Mika Rämet, who is medical director of Finnish vaccine research. And here is the emphasis, of course, with the pandemic, COVID-19, and how this Rämet increased the visibility of research-based knowledge on COVID-19 and vaccine research. And we know that this was very polemic topic, of course, which divided society. And it was very tricky or not so easy for researchers to be part of that discussion also. And then there is this aerosol physics laboratory, also for the research that benefits society. And it was emphasized that the laboratory has a very strong societal and global dimension because it seeks to prevent climate change and improve air quality. So just as an example, these. Then we have Open Science Award. We have that at the national level, National Open Science and Research Award, which our Open Science Coordination then gives. And then our university also has Open Science Award. It's pretty new, so since 2021, and here also we have open call for suggestions, and the recipient is chosen by our Open Science steering group. But then about visibility, it's of course very, very fundamental part of societal impact, how research can be found and our researchers also. And we have that national platform, research.fi, and it aims to increase the visibility and societal impact of Finnish research. And it is very actively developed to include more and more different types of outputs and also these activities, and to also with this research.fi also we should be able to also demonstrate, for example, different types of collaboration. And here is one example from this portal, and as I mentioned before, our research performing organizations are being monitored, evaluated regarding their open science maturity. And this is how my university is shown in these results. This is the latest 2022, and now we are just going through the newest. We have every second year this monitoring evaluation. And this overall picture shows how we are doing in comparison with other Finnish universities, and also share of peer-reviewed publications, which play a big role, and the rate of openness. And we are presented here in all the main aspects of open science, so open scholarship, open publishing, open research data, and open education. And this is also one way for our ministry to push us forward in open science and societal impact development, so that this is being made so visible and public how we are doing. And as mentioned, so it includes our open science documents, open science related services, and openness of some concrete outputs which are being monitored. And in this year's model also this networking is included. You can in this portal see all the answers which I have provided to this evaluation, but unfortunately in Finnish. But what are our next steps now? So we are, as said, we are now planning our more concrete Quora action plan. We are doing at this stage preparing in a pretty small working group which represents a specialist from research services, HOAN, metrics, and open science, and then we are getting more and more the whole community, of course, involved. And then we are also developing further our own organizational awarding system and strengthening the collaboration in national and international level. Yep, and what I would like you to sum up, to take some takeaways. So there are no best nor most when we consider societal impact, but it can still be recognized, and it should be actively encouraged and awarded. And promoting open science goes hand in hand with enabling the societal impact and is also very crucial for the benefit of society, both locally and globally. So, thank you.
Susanna, thank you really very much for that. I love the concept of sleeping beauties. I think in all research, there are sleeping beauties at all stages, and we overlook them at our peril. So thank you. So I now want to move on to our third speaker, who is Deputy Vice-Chancellor at Stellenbosch University and from the National Research Foundation of South Africa, Professor Sibusiso Moyo. Professor Moyo, please would you give your presentation? I hope we've got your slides. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you can see them on your side.
Yeah, lovely.
I can proceed. Thank you so much, and thank you for this invitation. I will just talk to you because of the two colleagues have probably described what they're doing. So I'll just give a quick sort of rundown of what's happening within the sector, and then also just some general comments about the African landscape at large. So we talk a lot about metrics, trying to evaluate impact. And if you look at across the sector, many universities in South Africa and also in the African continent, at least the ones that belong to what we call the Network for the Africa Research University Alliance, have also a focus on impact, which is a big discussion in our space. And we know that there are many examples from, the UK, Australia. We've been following what's happening there, and we're also trying to develop impact case studies, which we can also profile in our case. So if you can just go to can I move the slides myself? Am I able to have control? Okay, so yeah, so I'll reflect a little bit on, strategies used within the African context, and then some broader comments around impact and metrics, and then maybe I'll give a few examples from my setup, and then I'll just say a little bit about where we are. And I must acknowledge also the data that we normally get from Elsevier through our library and some of the presentations that they do for us. Thank you. So next slide. So I just wanted to say, maybe if I just go one step back here to just say that evaluating research impact beyond traditional metrics like citation counts and impact factors is becoming more important. In our case, as you can imagine, especially like in South Africa and then also Africa in general, the main challenge is trying to actually justify the role that universities play within society, and also to justify the resource allocation. So it is a big area for us as universities to showcase. And the question is, why do impact? For us, of course, when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which we try to localize our real issues around trying to realize the full African potential, which remains a challenge in terms of addressing issues around poverty, inequality, and employment, health, food security, water, but also trying to contribute to justify the contribution that universities do. So I belong to a number of networks. So I'm a mathematician by background, but also currently the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research, Innovation, and Postgraduate Studies. As part of that network, we have what we call the African Research University Alliance, which consists of all research-intensive universities in Africa. And through that, there are a number of goals that have been set, like training 1,000 PhDs annually, but then also, of course, then comes the issue of impact, but we also, also look at the Africa Union Agenda 2063. And then recently, what we have done also try to align to the European Union and African Union agenda, which focuses on 4 areas. I'll just mention them just now. But what is important to know is that through this alliance, which involves the African universities, but of course, we also collaborate with other universities in South Africa and in the continent as well. The 4 focus areas that we've been focusing on already around the AI and artificial intelligence, renewable energy, health is one area, and then this, climate change and climate change adaptation. But within the university, Stellenbosch University context, we're actually leading 4 of these areas together with our ARUA partners, the African Research University Alliance and the Guild, European Universities of Research in these 4 areas, because we believe these are the areas that will help us to transform and create a critical mass in terms of capacity building. In the South African context, the ministry itself has set up an agenda which helps us to measure our science and technology innovation. It's a decadal plan which runs over 10 years. Again, there you'll see that there are focus areas, but also talks about impact. And where we are now through the Department of Science and Innovation, the National Research Foundation, and also the University of South Africa, which is a network which also is a network for all the public universities, is a discussion of impact and what we're doing about that. So Elsevier, of course, provides data for us, and you see that in terms of South Africa, currently in terms of our research output, South Africa, Egypt, and maybe Nigeria, play a big role in terms of their contribution over the last few years. So this data, of course, is data that we use when we are trying to showcase the impact as a country, but of course it is quantitative. So you may argue that, well, but what do you do with that? And this data, I think most, universities have this data from the cyber database, Scopus, but you see as a contribution as a country, contributes a lot to health, and then of course the sciences, which have done very well, STEM in general. And so one of the parts we're also trying to push is the role that the humanities and social sciences play because we believe when we talk about impact, it's broader than just the subject. And the other aspect, I think, for this graph and compliments to acknowledge the Elsevier group is you can see again that in terms of impact, when you're just looking at the metrics, the impact of what we've produced over the years as South Africa has grown from 1 point, if you look at the field weighted citation index and so forth. But the question is, again, what does that mean for the country, and how do we translate this into policy and, attracting more investment into our research? So it is a sort of an area which we keep on talking about. So in our context, you can see again, if you're just looking at the metrics, this would be your top few universities in terms of the, the publication database. And you can see here that the international collaboration is a critical sort of measure which helps to rank universities. And even the discussion on rankings for us is around where we discuss as a sector, issues around how important is this for us? Does it make sense considering where we are economically? But you see, according to this table, University of Cape Town has the largest international collaboration. And of course, then you've got Wits, University of Johannesburg, and we are also appearing in the top 5. We do use these, of course, when we're discussing. And then in terms of the areas that have a big impact, you can see that if you have to now align to the Sustainable Development Goals, there is, we contribute to all the 17 goals, and, poverty, and the no poverty one, gender equality. And in fact, today as a university, we're also hosting the Gender and Corruption conference today, which is quite interesting. And so, yeah, there are many areas that we contribute to, and that for us, that's important. So I just want maybe as a takeaway, and just to see how to end, is that storytelling, I think, for research is important. And so we profile these stories because we know that the quantitative measures are really, it's something we do anyway, but for us, the value that we add to society and the evidence that we produce is something that's critical, that we're really working on and trying to actually come up with metrics for that. So you see that here it's like typical stories that we tell. Here we're collaborating with the government, for example, the UN around the giving evidence based on the Sustainable Development Goal implementation, the School for Climate Change, which we have set up, which is interdisciplinary. Again, we try to tell these stories. Whom are we working with, and what is the outcome of that? Yes, an agreement is signed, but that's not the impact of the work that's being done. And here, maybe I should skip that one really. And one of the other areas I should mention, this one, is that our greatest impact is also, like right now for the African continent, is the skills training, capacity building. And so we focus a lot on that. And you see in these pictures, all the future generation academics who are on the Future Professors program, for example, where we also tell stories of their success, the work they do. We profile the research focus areas. And then, of course, just one thing I wanted to share is that even though there's a debate about rankings and people, complain, but actually nationally, we're also ranked, and we are ranked based on the research publications that you produce, the master's students that you produce, and the doctorates. And this gives you the ranking in terms of some quantitative measures. So I'll just flag that. And then I think the other thing I need to say is that then we look at other things, what's happening in terms of what we call national ratings, and, looking at the participation of women in research, our doctoral graduates, and then students. So there's another part which we don't talk about. For us, we believe impact in terms of entrepreneurship and, the number of students who are able to start up their own enterprises is something we can use to account for our contributions. So this is a big part of what we do as well. So I guess I'll stop here, but the takeaway really is that there is, I think, storytelling in terms of the research, but also working with the communities that we actually collaborate with, for them to also tell us what their view and experience has been dealing with us. And, so we are in that phase where we are, I should mention this maybe because I might be punished if not. So just to show the greater impact. So the Templeton Prize winner for 2024 came from this university, and she's based in the School for the Afterlife of Violence and Repatriative Quest, which is more a social sciences field. So she's, Mother Teresa was one of the recipients of that. So she's, Pumla Gobodo Matigizela is one of the winners, and this is her center. I thought I should show that. But you can see also the focus on capacity building, training the next generation. working with communities around their, experiences and trying to help them to overcome that. And yeah, so I think I'll stop there and just say that, we should just continue trying to work on this together. And I'm happy to also that, to hear colleagues from, especially, I know the UK and also Australia that have done a lot of work also in this area that we can learn from as well. So yeah, I'll end there, but you can find the rest of our impact stories that we tell in here. You will find things like, for example, if you didn't know that turmeric is good for you, you may actually find a story there for your health as well. I would encourage you to do that. So there's a lot that goes on, but thank you so much. I'll stop there.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Thank you, Professor Moyo. So I think we've heard from our three speakers really different angles of impact and where their universities and their countries and the context they're working in to try and get to a better understanding and a shared understanding of not just science or research excellence, but the impact and the value of research to nations. So we've seen some good examples. I want to ask each of our panelists now a question, and the question will come first to Keith as he spoke first, because he's had the longest rest. And that is, if you balance indicators of impact against narratives for impact, where do you think we are today, and where would you like to see us in 10 years' time?
Thank you, Lesley. That's quite a challenging one to start with. I think at the moment, as I think I indicated in my talk, the metrics that we can use for impact are actually very underdeveloped, and there are very few of them that actually get to the real impact rather than showing what might be part of the pathway to impact. So I suspect we're doing sort of 90% based on end user corroboration and descriptions and evidence, and probably 10% something like metrics, but it would vary depending on the type of impact. As I said, something like policy impact is easier to metricize. I think we do, though, need to move to much greater use of metrics for impact. They will never replace the descriptions of impact, the evidence and corroboration from end users. But I think we have to be able to have these in institutions to help us try to find the highest impact things, because in essence, impact and puppies is a bit like ref and Christmas. Let me unpack that really. But we should be evidencing the impact of all the research we do, not simply saying, here are a couple of very high impact case studies we want to offer up for some form of assessment. Now, in order to do that, then, we have to be able to generate automated metrics to guide us where to intervene to try and unpack some of the other requirements, particularly around evidence and corroboration. So I think we need to move probably to something like a 50-50 measure. I think at the moment, the metrics are probably less than 10% and maybe zero in some areas.
Yeah. Thank you. Can I turn to you, Susanna, now with the same question? The balance between metrics and narrative today and in 10 years' time for impact.
Thank you. I agree with Keith what he said, and I think we need both, but partly for different reasons. But coming from support services, I would like to emphasize that aspect, and my wish is that within 10 years of time, we have proper support also for this narrative CVs and stories of impact, which we do not have today. We are far from that, I think. And I'm not just speaking on behalf here, Tampere University, Finland, but also globally, I think. So we need to develop further both the tools and also support for writing the narratives and stories of impact. And when doing so, we should also remember that research is international, and we should support also the mobility of researchers, so that researchers, not every time they are seeking for funding or new place of work, so they don't need to study and learn a new system and method I think, of course, the content varies depending on what you are seeking and what you are supposed to show, of course. But when it comes to tools and the methods also, we have much to develop together. So we should find the best practices and develop the best tools and support together globally. Thank you.
Globally, I couldn't agree more with that. And finally, Professor Moyo, you're clearly a wonderful storyteller. And in thinking about the stories you tell, you surrounded your stories with lots of data that the South African government or funders use to tell their story. So if you look forward, the balance between narrative and metrics and indicators for impact, where do you think they will be in 10 years' time?
Yeah, I think that maybe I can agree with the previous speakers that it might be, the way I see it is that it might be maybe almost a 50, I would say 40-60 balance. There will probably be more 60% of, the stories, the qualitative sort of inputs, and then maybe 40% of the actual quantity. There's more and more. We've just gone through an election now, for example, and you can see from the results, people really want to see things working rather than just, sharing the data. But I think evidence plays a big role in what we do. And so it's the type of evidence that we collect, and how we build that into our plans, our proposals from the onset, because often we think about the impact traditionally after the fact. But of course, now more and more funders are also requiring that. Even the National Research Foundation, if you look at the applications that we have to fill in, we have to actually think about the impact as we, put our proposals forward. So I do see that there'll be probably more of that. And then also evidence-based in terms of policy interventions. That is one area which has become also quite important for us. So, giving evidence and showing the impact. I think also helping our local governments, both national and local, in terms of collecting that evidence. Yeah, if the politicians are willing to work with the academics, it's also another area we have to push.
Yeah.
But I think in the health sciences, for example, it's become quite critical, for even interventions for health, to have that data. So I think there would be a balance of about 40-60. That's my prediction.
Okay, thank you. And you were very explicit in talking about the South African experience and your university's experience on the importance of people delivering impact. And after all, universities are machines that produce people. That's the core thing that universities should do. So thinking about that, how do you measure the impact of the people, or would you like to measure the impact of the people that are coming out of your university and impacting on society?
Oh, yes, I think that's an interesting question. So when you think about it, everything we measure actually is surrounded about what the people in the system are doing. So one has to think about that way, that in fact, when we talk about impact, we're actually talking about our students, our alumni, our staff, and the people that we network with as part of the ecosystem. How all of that comes together in order to, put an intervention in place, develop a new product. Often that is important. So I think all of this, even though we talk about it as if it is something else, but it's actually linked to the people that we have. So if you recruit the best people that you can, talented people, and give them the environment that's enabling, then they can actually, do great things. We have seen that in terms of, if I look at even during COVID-19, the group that was able to sequence the genome, Omicron for, COVID-19, during the COVID-19 pandemic, it was a big group. Collaborations from here, several of the local universities as well, within the continent, globally as well. But if you look at that group, it's the talent, right? And the passion. And there's young people, there's diversity. So the group is very diverse. It's not just one group. So I think that there's a lot there to do with, when we talk about impact, talking also about the contribution by the people themselves that are involved.
Okay. And Keith, can I ask you the importance and the balance between people and the ideas that lead to impact and research, and where you'd like to be with that story in 5 years' time?
I think it's worth looking at that in two ways. Firstly, as to what we need to do in terms of people inside universities to enhance impact. And secondly, how we perhaps want to track the evidence of people once they've left the institution. Just to wind back, in the context of REF, the underpinning impact had to be undertaken at the institution claiming the impact. So if a researcher moved, the research they'd done stayed with the previous institution. That's quite an important principle, I think. But I think, as well as obviously ensuring that our researchers are far better oriented to the concepts of public engagement and to working with professional services colleagues and academics who are closer to knowledge transfer, enterprise exploitation, however you refer to it, there also needs to be much greater institutional support and recognition of the value of doing that as well. So let me try and explain that. We often think about knowledge transfer partnerships and spin-outs and licensing agreements and startups in the context of what are called HEBKIS metrics in the UK, the Higher Education Business Collaboration Index. But we think about them in that box. We don't see them as part of a continuum of putting our research to work. The other part, I think, is increasingly making sure that our researchers are better understanding that demand-led research isn't somehow lower quality research. Frascati identifies basic research, applied R&D, experimental development. They're all research for all of these purposes. So it's not dirty or second quality research to be working as a research performer inside, for example, a UKRI funded project. So there's a piece of vocabulary there as well. So better training of academics to understand the need for impact, better training of people inside the university to effectively take on some of that baton, or to work with the academics to not only deliver impact, but to evidence it longitudinally. So things like your library, your Marcoms department, harvesting press releases relating to the work of researchers are all important. Sorry, long answer, but the bit about evidencing what our staff and students go on to do once they've left the institution is important. And obviously we all like to point to our successful alumni and others. And we have a campaign currently running called Look at Me Now, showing what a number of our graduates have gone on to do. I'm slightly more nervous about that in terms of the context of what we're discussing here, because while we may have trained those people, I'm not sure that what they then go on to do in their professional lives, we can necessarily claim anything from that, apart from the nice warm feeling that we've contributed some very useful members to society. So I think there's a lot we can do inside the university. Outside, I'm a little bit more nervous about trying to claim things where, while we've planted the seed, we haven't necessarily nourished it or contributed to the further development of the person.
So Susanna, you made a very strong point about the value of prizes and awards to recognise impact and open science. And I think I would absolutely concur with that. I'd like to understand who drove that.
So that we are giving that kind of awards, or yes, well, at the national level, it's Ministry of Education who is very, very motivated and is also funding our national coordination for open science. But then at the university level, it is a question of more individuals, I think, who are making that initiative and who want to make the difference. But then I would like to take this up to a very broad level, and I think as a community, also globally, so how we are doing or managing with our societal impact, so it can be also measured with the rate of happiness, rate of well-being. So it also tells a story how our students who have then after graduation participated in the working life also outside academia, and how is our research making difference.
Wide picture of societal impact that I hope gives us all time to reflect. We've certainly been reflecting on impact and the whole academic evaluation framework at Elsevier, and we don't have the answers, but you can see on the screen the framework we're working towards to try and get better measures beyond bibliometrics to look at how we should evaluate the total work of academia and how it makes a difference to the world. There's a final poll we're going to leave you to, which is what's your biggest challenge in measuring impact? And I'd like to point now to, we have 2 more webinars in these series coming up. The dates are known. I'd like to thank you all for your participation, but this webinar would not have been possible without the splendid interventions and thoughtful presentations from our 3 speakers. So I'd like to thank all 3 speakers for their wonderful insights today. I hope that's been valuable to you. And if you have any comments or observations, the details of who to contact in Elsevier will be on the screen shortly, she says. And I'd like to wish you all now a very productive rest of the day. And I hope in our working lives, we can all look forward to achieving yet more impact, inspired by what we've heard today. Thank you all very much indeed. And good afternoon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.